you all waiting.
No, you're good.
Thanks for
I
getting
need
here.
to talk to you about the phone app.
You're good.
I'm good.
We're good.
Called order of the Portland Planning Sustainability Commission June 10th meeting. Items of interest from commissioners and then director's report. We have a consent agenda, consideration of minutes from 5/13. Proposed street vacation of a portion of Northeast Vancouver Way, south of Northeast Skirts Road, and proposed vacation of a portion of East Burnside Street, west of Northeast MLK Junior Boulevard. Then we have a comprehensive plan update, and after that, a Willamette River Goal 15 inventories briefing. Both of those are briefings. Items of interest from commissioners? Chris?
Well, I know that the chair and vice chair attended and testified at the short-term rentals hearing at council. I had a chance to watch it on TiVo, and I'd be interested in your reflections on what you heard and saw.
Yeah, I think it was a good hearing. I think council heard much of what we heard, but they heard a couple other things that we didn't hear. One was the concern about condos and apartments, and really Airbnb brought up a lawyer to kind of dispute that, the city's finding of that. And the other was vacation rentals, which we did not address. And so I don't know what council's going to do with those, but hopefully they, ask BPS to take a look at them and bring them back in the future. And from that, I thought the testimony was good. I think it heard many of the same things we heard. Airbnb and some other platforms had a lot of testifiers from that standpoint. Good community testimony also. And Kat did a great job presenting the letter.
Andre, would you say that the council got the message around close cooperation, call that transparency between Airbnb and the city going forward, given, Airbnb's experience with New York City, giving certain data?
I don't think they got that message of close cooperation. Amanda, there was two amendments to the ordinances, and the first was Amanda for.
I can go over all of them if you want.
Okay, if you've got them all.
Sure.
But Howard, I don't think they got the message of close cooperation. I think what they did hear is concerns about the inspections. They heard, and they had a lot of good questions, similar to ours, and even more about inspections, because and it was brought up in various forums, affordability of housing, neighborhood concerns, noise. So they heard many of the concerns and even more around some of those issues.
Okay.
And just one other item from us, if there's not. Karen Gray and myself last Friday attended termed a immigrant tour of East Portland. And so we went to Urco and then Rosewood and had a series of presentations on immigrants' ability to come into the city of Portland and establish businesses, establish a life. And was interesting from immigrants' perspective. Portland is deemed as a great opportunity to come and establish a life and a business, and from that standpoint. So, but the city of Portland is hard to get into because of affordable housing. So many immigrants come in are placed that are wanted to come into Portland are placed in Hillsborough, Beaverton, somewhere else, and then they wait to get an apartment or house in Portland, especially on the east side of Portland. So it was a great tour. A lot of good things happening out there, but what you realize is a lot more could happen, and you also realize the vulnerability of those neighborhoods that are out there relative to how fragile it is relative to any increase in a lot of development could push them out.
So were the two examples, Beaverton and Hillsborough, just that examples, or is there a preponderance of west side out in that direction of folks settling as opposed to outer east?
For the immigrants to come in, they have to have a home, and that's part of the regulations. And there are no homes in Portland that meet the affordability and things. So it is Beaverton, it is Hillsborough that have the homes for them to be able to occupy as part of the regulation of immigration. And when we talk to ERCO only deals with documented immigrants. And so essentially we were talking about documented immigrants coming through the immigration process. And that was what they were telling us.
Just, I had a quick, is it a long list of the amendments that were made for the short-term rentals, or is
I
it
have
short?
3 and then some other discussion points.
Okay, so at some point I'd like to hear that list.
Okay.
I heard 2 of them, but I didn't get all 3.
Howard, did you have a question?
Oh, mine was more about your visit, yours and Karen's, when you say visiting an immigrant population. I've always felt that populations tend to stay together, that certain Laotian people, Hispanic people, so it isn't just a single issue, it's how they tend to, I don't like to say they, but there's clusters of ethnic vitality that tend to settle around each other. So maybe the reason, I mean, you notice it in the east side, or east. I just want to point that out, that it isn't just counting immigrant population, it's counting large clusters that tend to settle in particular areas. Or is that valid? That's my sense.
No, that was very, very valid. And what you heard is the communities tend to support themselves. So kind of Eastern European, Croatian, Ukrainian, Russian communities tend to support themselves. The Vietnamese, the Chinese communities, they have an interconnected community that works with newcomers that pass the language barrier. You're talking 50 languages that ERCO officially does work with. Much more than that when you get to sub-languages and things. So those are part of the issue is even though they may go to another community initially through the immigration process, those large concentrations of communities are really in East Portland, and that ability to go to a community that has food, religion, and and jobs.
Food and jobs.
And so those things are where to even find a job that, even in a connected restaurant, and many things are important to those communities.
I was flying back from Seattle a few years ago, and I was blown away. There was a family who were immigrating from Russia, and we wound up 2 or 3 in the morning, something like that, flight delay, fog or whatever, and there were 300 people waiting to greet that one family.
Wow.
It was stunning. It was incredible. The same thing in Seattle.
Yeah.
When folks got off in Seattle, the terminal was full of people greeting them.
That's cool.
What we also heard, which was phenomenal, is that English in many of these communities is a third language. So they may have an indigenous language, even from Mexico, then Spanish is the second, and English is the third language. So language is a huge barrier. Many of the issues for immigrants also was customs, that just getting familiar with the U.S. customs of how to childcare and schooling and jobs and things they're different from where they came from.
So we'll briefly sort of update on what we call Recap 6. So we split Recap into 2 parts. We split it into 2 ordinances so that we could do the first one, which was the 30-something different amendments, kind of small amendments. That went through the reading, very little comment on that, and we'll go to a second reading tomorrow. for a vote. And so those were the amendments that you all passed on. The second was on the short-term rentals. There were probably 6 or 7 significant questions that council had. There was a suggestion, which the mayor took up, which was let's do a work session on this. So they're going to have a work session on June 24th at 10 a.m. And some of the things they're going to talk about are inspections, how to do them, what we're going to propose, number of bedrooms that could be rented, the issue around are there options for multifamily buildings, and then as Andre mentioned, vacation rentals. Those were all issues. There were 3 actual amendments made at the hearing last week. And one was to change, you'll remember the discussion we had about inspections, whether to have them or not. They kind of landed in the middle, which was to have an inspection the first time. And then after that, to let people self-inspect, to say, basically check the boxes and sign their name that nothing's changed in the interim. And so I think that's a potentially good solution to that. The second amendment was to require carbon monoxide detectors also, along with smoke detectors. So that was put on the table. And then the third was to direct BPS and BDS to work together to come back to council in 2016 with sort of an impacts report on what are the impacts of this amendments on affordable housing and on other issues. And so those 3 are on the table. I think there was a lot of agreement around that. So we'll have the meeting June 24th. It would have been sooner, but calendars are starting to break down for council in the summer. If that goes well in terms of a lot of discussion, a lot of agreement on where they went ahead, then there would probably be the next reading and then the vote on, the reading would be at July 2nd and then a vote would be July 9th. So I do think the issues around vacation rentals, which are whole home rentals, which may or may not be a primary residence of someone, is an issue that we chose all here not to take on. And then the multifamily issue was one that Development Services had told us that it was not appropriate to change because it would actually change the building type if they began to then, they would have to then meet all the standards of like a hotel if they were to shift to that. So that will be a lively discussion. Any of you who are interested in coming will be there. Sandra will be leading that discussion with the council members. And then the other item, oh, did you have a question?
I just wanted to observe, it's great that you're gonna go back and revisit it, see how we've done. I wanna be obsessive about saying we be sure we get all the data we need from this big player to help work that out in the mix when you revisit it. That's what I really am talking about. In looking at this long term, I think Airbnb will have a lot of data that we'll need just to comport how it's working. And we ought to be sure that they'll help give us that.
Yeah, I think there was, well, 2 issues. One is I think that they're very open to that, and I think they see the writing on the wall and that they want to be a good player. Second is they're not the only game in town. There are a whole lot of other short-term rentals that don't go through Airbnb in the city, and so getting data is going to be hard to do the report in general, but we'll figure out a way to get what we can and to be able to tell the story. I particularly want to thank Kat and Andre, and then also Gary went to one meeting. They met with all the council members and spent enough time.
Chris.
Oh, Chris came too, right. Sorry. Y'all were there. And I think they all had a lot of good questions. So what ended up, I think the other lesson in this is we learned that for Recap 7, which will come and bring a proposed work plan to this commission and then the commission approves that, we've learned that it is good to have a bucket of, whether it's 10 or 20 or 30 small fixes, and that we can take on one big issue each time as part of that process, and that they're very different things, but that they're still in the package together, and that the longer one might not even fit in the year. It might take 18 months to get done. So we'll bring some suggestions and our recommendation for what that work plan will be probably in 6 or 8 weeks. Back to you guys. And then the other item I just wanted to mention was kind of related to Recap, which is our budget. And I'm not sure that I actually went over what we ended up, the results of the budget process for BPS. In terms of Recap, BDS, Development Services, was directed to fund 2.5 positions in planning and sustainability to continue the Recap program for the coming year. So we're working closely with them, obviously, to help direct what the work plan's going to be. Another item is we actually, after asking for the 5 years I've been here, to shift some of the one-time money that we are going back every year and asking for, they're shifting $500,000 about onto ongoing funding, and that'll pay for 2.5 district liaisons, actually 3.5 district liaisons, and 2 people to work on ongoing code issues around comprehensive plan or implementation of the code. And then there was a direction to have PDC pay for 2 positions working on code issues and implementation issues, particularly in the central city. So it was a good budget year for us. I think part of that was the mayor had 3 items that were of specific focus that he wanted to get done in this budget, and one of those was healthy, connected neighborhoods. So the work of the Portland plan and everything that we've done has sunk in, and I think that resulted both in our budget and some of the other housing transportation budgets being recognized as implementing some top priorities for the mayor. So,
Great.
Also, Daniel is our new budget analyst right there. So we've encouraged him to come so that he can see what it is that we do for some of the work.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Any other comments?
Table
Consent agenda. Is everyone okay with the consent agenda?
Can I move approval, please?
Second?
Moves and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Passes. Comprehensive plan update schedule. Deborah?
Hi, so I'm Deborah Stein, and I want to do 2 things. I want to walk you through the upcoming schedule for the comp plan and how you'll be involved with that. But I also want to walk you through what's happening on the public side before, during, and after the launch of the draft plan, because I think you'll be interested in seeing how that's going to unfold. So let me start with your schedule, and you have a handout in front of you, and this is an update of what had been previously emailed to you, so this is the one to look at. So this is looking at what's happening over the summer and into the fall of this year. We're going to be doing 3 briefings for you about the comp plan update to really get you prepared for the testimony you'll be hearing. So we want you to have the full depth of the content presented to you, but what we want to do is make sure that that's happening separately from the hearings, because once we start the hearings, we want those hearings to be really devoted to the public and not take up time with us presenting. So we're going to be doing the presentations up front, and I think that's helpful for you to digest that in advance of hearing any testimony. So we've divided the briefings into 3 chunks. And the first will be right at the beginning of when the draft will be published. The first one's July 22nd. We'll be doing a broad overview, but really getting into the policy, the goals and policies in that briefing. And the second one on August 12th, we'll be looking at the map. My guess is that you're going to be hearing most testimony about the map and about the project list. So we want you to really understand sort of where the changes are proposed, what they mean, what they don't mean. So that's the focus of August 12th. That briefing will be paired up with a recap hearing and a briefing on the West Quad as well. So it's going to be an active session. On your list, there's another briefing on August 26th. So this is not about the comp plan, but it's on your schedule, just so you see how the schedule unfolds. And then the third briefing about the comp plan will be on September 9th, and that will focus on the citywide systems plan and the transportation systems plan. And again, that will be not the only thing on your agenda. You'll also have these other 2, the West Quad hearing and a PDC urban renewal area briefing. So those are the briefings. Then we're scheduling 4 hearings on the comp plan update. And these are going to be bookended. The first and the fourth will be here in this building, but the 2 middle hearings will be out in the community. And we're now in the process of selecting venues for those 2 community hearings. Our thought about the hearings spaced out in the community, our thought is we want to take a kind of analytical look of where the most map change proposals are located. We want to look at who's affected by changes in the map and then locate the hearings in 2 locations where we can most actively capture, the audience who would have most of an interest in participating. So those will be 2 different locations, but I can't tell you yet where those will be because we're still figuring that out. So the first hearing, well, I should say, at any of these 4 hearings, we will invite the public to testify about whatever they want to testify. But we're going to give kind of a theme for each hearing and try to make the testimony most digestible for you, try and concentrate on these themes. But we also want it to be as manageable and easy and convenient as possible for the public so they can come to whatever schedule they want. Anyway, the first one, September 23rd, is our first hearing scheduled, and we would be focusing mostly on goals and policies, and that again would be here. The second one, October 14th, we would focus on the map. October 28th, again, focus on a map, but in a different community location. And then we would have our 4th hearing on November 4th, focusing on the citywide systems plan and transportation systems plan.
A
And
question
that again
just
would be here.
on the, why at 4 p.m.?
Why at 4 p.m.? There was something else scheduled in this room. It was a little bit of a scheduling logistics. You see the times all here. We wanted to have the evening meeting start at 5 to be able to span sort of workday and into the evening. The 4 p.m. originally, I think we were trying to have that be an afternoon, but the room was booked. But we could also make it later if that seemed.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking it's the transportation plan, and probably a lot of people will probably want to come and talk about the transportation plan.
Yeah, we expect that's going to be a pretty lively one too. And so one of the thoughts about 4 is you capture some people, it's still their work day if they can only make it during a work day, and that you also can span into the evening if they can only come after work. So it straddles, but we're open to feedback about that if evening is better.
Okay.
It's always tricky because we have such a broad audience we want to attract. And then you can see there are a couple other things on the schedule. The 2 November meetings are not at the typical dates just because of the holidays, so we are proposing alternate or unusual dates for those, but that's listed here. So any questions about that?
A question on the July 22nd policy and overview. Will we get at that point kind of the draft of?
You will. So that was my next. The launch date is currently scheduled for July 21st. So really that first briefing will be kind of the introductory session where we can walk through. You'll just be seeing it. The public will just be seeing the draft. So we'll be able to walk through. You'll have a copy at that opportunity, and we'll walk through what's in it. So it'll be an introduction, and then we'll dive deeper into the goals and policies with more content focus. So, yeah. Any other questions about the schedule before I kind of go into the public side of this?
Not really a question, but flagging a minor concern I'm not sure there's an answer for. I'm on the TSP expert group.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a couple of issues of kind of sequencing that have come up there. One is the expert group, and I think echoing community, has expressed an interest in an opportunity to expand the project list that gets into the TSP. Concern that paradigms are changing. We've got a lot of old projects that will be judged against new filters, and we like the new filters that are being developed, but we'd love to see projects that reflect the new paradigms in there competing with the other projects that are being filtered and looking for ways to get projects into that pool. And then also a little bit of consternation that the TGM grant for on-street parking is kind of happening in parallel and won't be done in time to really factor into the TSP. And obviously lots of transportation policy hinges on parking, so concern that there's this major piece that we're not going to be able to adequately digest. And I don't know what the answers to either of those are, but I just want to flag.
Okay, no, thank you for raising it. I don't know how to respond, but thanks. We'll carry that message. So, for the public, here's kind of how the next few months are going to look. We're, again, looking at a July 21st launch date for the full proposed plan. So that's goals and policies, maps, and the projects list. So what's happening in advance of that launch date are a few things. One is we've already started to get the word out through the curbsider, which goes to every household in Portland. We've had a number of ads in community newspapers. We know that the community newspapers are really, and ethnic, culturally based newspapers are a good way to get the word out to communities. So we've already been getting the word out about the upcoming proposal. We've been doing a lot of our sort of usual outreach to coalitions, business organizations, nonprofit organizations, just to say this is coming soon and this is what's going to be in it. So we've been trying to get the word out that way. And sometime between now and July 21st, probably right around the end of June, early July, we are going to be publishing an early preview of the MAP app. And you remember the MAP app from before, which is an online interactive tool for looking at the map. We are updating that to show the new proposal, and it'll again be interactive. It'll even be a better design for this new function, this new purpose, because you'll be able to type in your address or any address you want, and it'll show you what might be changing, if anything, on your property, but also in the vicinity. So it'll be really easy for somebody to be able to look at what's happening in any location that they're interested in. And the other thing is that the map app is being redesigned to be very useful on a mobile device, on a phone, so, which is remarkable to me that you can do that. So they are really designing it with that in mind. So we're going to have a preview of the map app available before the actual launch date, and there'll be a caveat saying this isn't the 100% ready proposal, but it's a way for people to start looking at what might be changing in their vicinity or in their property. The other thing that's happening between now and July 21st is we're setting up kind of a large customer service structure, kind of an apparatus that will allow us, the minute that launch date happens and we're going to be ready for phone calls, we're going to be ready for inquiries, and we want to have that whole customer service structure ready to go. So we're setting up a variety of things, a way to have a number of people able to answer the phone promptly. We want to have just really strong customer service, and we know people are going to be, concerned, curious, confused, and so we want to have people who can really talk through, do some hand-holding and talk through any questions that people may have. So we'll have people on a phone bank. We're also setting up some kinds of sort of drop-in office hours. So for example, we might have office hours on such and such a night during these hours at the Midland Library, and we would advertise these so people can come in and ask questions to a person in person. And then we also want to be able to do some sort of trainings, Land Use 101, just really help people feel informed, educated, to be able to offer, to be able to understand what is proposed, know how it may or may not affect them, and then to be able to offer really good, effective testimony as well. Because at that point, we want to be doing some technical assistance for community capacity building for community members so that they can offer effective testimony to you. So that, all of that kind of organizing is happening, starting to happen now, so that we are ready on July 21st. And then, right around the same time that the proposal is published, we're going to be sending out postcards to every affected property owner. Anybody who has a map change proposed for their property, they'll get a postcard. The postcard is, the main message is, we'd like you to pay attention to this proposal because it may affect you, and here's what you do to find out more. So it won't have a lot of detail. What we understand is, in this particular case, we're reaching an enormous audience of people who haven't been following the comp plan update before, wouldn't know that they should be paying attention to the comp plan, wouldn't be looking at a planning listing, but suddenly they're affected because their property is shown. So we want them to have easy avenues, multiple avenues to get their questions answered. So that postcard will basically say, here's what you do to find out more. So once that postcard goes out, right around July 21st, we know we're going to get a lot of inquiries. We have to be kind of ready for that. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Catherine?
On the map app, I think one of the comments we got, and help me refresh my memory, gang here, was that it would have been very useful to get some demographic information, if I remember right. And has that been added
Yes.
in to be able to do that this time around?
I think yes, but the trick is if people have, well, so let me back up. There is a way for people through the MAP app, there will be a way for people through the MAP app to provide testimony, and it will be considered official testimony. We also want to capture demographic information, but we don't want to have somebody, because they might be providing name, address, we want any demographic information to be decoupled from their identifying information. So I think we might still be trying to figure that out, but I don't know where we've landed on that. It is very useful to have that, and we want to know who's using the tool and what the comments are, but we don't want it to be associated with identification, because that puts it in a whole different realm. So I think the answer is we're working on that.
Sounds great. And then one other, it's kind of a twofold question, but it's, I've been getting through not only my profession, but working on the West Quadrant Stakeholders Advisory Committee, which is always a mouthful. Lots of questions and confusion about implementation and kind of the process, kind of, let's say, after this process. So I guess, are we looking to maybe issue something on that soon, as you talk about
Yeah.
educating the public and outreach
Yeah.
to them, explaining what's, I'm sure you're going to explain it then, but it'd be great to have something kind of out there with all that you're sending out that kind
Yes.
of talks about that.
And so I have a couple things to say about that. One is that when I mentioned the postcards that are going out, one thing we're doing is separating out the audience. There are a lot of property owners that are affected by the mixed use zoning project, which is one of several of our implementation projects. And they really need to hear a different message than the other property owners who might be affected by a change, because we're wanting them to be tracking this zoning project where a lot of the details will be filled out. So one thing is they'll be getting a separate mailing. But we also are going to be, during the summer, I didn't mention, we'll have some public involvement events, some kind of, and we haven't designed them yet, but there'll be, let's say if there's a big open house to share work in progress, we would be using that opportunity to not just feature the comp plan update, but all of the implementation projects that are going on. And each of them may be in a different phase of their development, but wherever they're at, they would come and share, what's going on. So mixed-use zoning may be fairly far along, where maybe something about employment zoning, a code update might be less far along, but they'd all be shared at that same event. So we want to keep all of those projects as a bundle, but at the same time not confuse people, because there are all these individual schedules, and it gets confusing if people say, well, wait, which one am I supposed to track? So we have to kind of
I
make
do
that
think that
clear.
we'll have something up front that explains that some of this is actually going to result in zone changes immediately, not very many though, and some of it is because some of it's just, it's not the zoning map yet, it's the comp plan map. And then some things are going to result in a process over the next year or 2 years or 3 years that will actually have specific impact on your land. And so we'll make sure that that's right up front. That'll be one of the talking points that we actually kind of looked at what happened when we changed everybody's garbage service to every other week. We realized we had to have a call center, and we got, whatever it was, 40,000 calls in a week, and realized there was a lot to learn from that. And so they've been working together, understanding how did that go, what kind of answers do you need? You need people to be really well-trained and well-versed to answer the questions. You can't just tell them that we'll get back to them with more information. So I think that part's going to go really well. But I do think it's going to be really important to have clear information up front about what this does and what it doesn't do kind of immediately.
I think that's great. Some quick feedback. So, like I said, I get asked this a lot by clients who've got properties who are wondering if they're going to be affected or not. And if there was, and maybe you're working on this, just a one-stop shopping center on your website that listed when it goes to PSC, when it goes to City Council. And since there's all these different parts and pieces just combined into one space, because it's like you don't know whether to go to East Side or West Quadrant or where.
Right.
It's a little confusing.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention we're developing lots of FAQs and revamping our website, so we try and provide a lot of that information. It's clearly because there's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, there is a lot.
And even just the confusion between a comprehensive plan map versus a zoning map. They're not the same, but most people think in terms of zoning, and we need to be able to explain that difference. And some people may have property where the comp plan designation isn't changing, but the zoning might change. So There's a lot to explain, and that's why we really wanted to rely on real-life people answering questions, because we can do only so much on a website, only so much with an FAQ. We really need to have people who can explain it. The other thing I forgot to mention, but you said something that triggered it, we're going to be meeting with various organizations who have memberships that include people who may be really affected by this. So, multifamily property owner, what is it, Family Northwest, is that what it's called? Just groups where they may work with lots of people who in turn would be affected. We'll do some trainings for groups so they in turn can help bring their memberships along. So as much as we can get people to understand what this does and doesn't mean for them, I think the better your testimony ultimately will be in terms of being, informed and really effective, clear testimony. So we've got a lot of things going on simultaneously.
Maybe a naive question. Are you working with ONI on this?
Yeah.
And getting good cooperation? That's an awfully good way to kind of organically spread this information.
Absolutely, yeah. ONI and then our diversity and civic leadership partners, we want to work with them again. We've got a number of partners we're working on to get the word out, but also to get feedback about how to explain things that are really complicated to audiences that aren't part of the conversation yet, and we really need to be, clearly communicating some pretty complicated stuff.
After the fact.
Just a follow-up
Missing tape.
on comments. The bureaus, in terms of getting their comments back to us in an appropriate time, are you working with them, and so that we don't get any last-minute letters?
Oh, yes. Yes, and we've been working with them even in just producing the draft. We've been going through rounds of interbureau conversations to get that.
We gave them a draft now. I mean, they've seen parts and pieces of the whole thing, but I gave to each of the planning and development directors a draft like a week or 10 days ago, and they have till Friday, I think it's till Friday or Monday, to get their comments back in again. And so they've seen it, iterations over and over again, so there shouldn't be any surprises. That doesn't mean they won't come in at the end. What we will really try hard to do is not have any directors come to the PSC with different recommendations than what's already been worked out in the draft.
Okay.
We know that's
was
happened
where
in
I
the
was
past.
going with it.
I can't guarantee it.
The other thing, and the short-term rentals has been illuminating from this fact as we went around to the different folks at council, is trying to get, and I know this is hard, but trying to get council and especially their staff engaged and informed about the comp plan. I mean, this is a big move, and many of the staff are reading it the minute before we walked in and trying to get up to speed, and so it's, if we can get, their engagement.
That's a good
and
reminder,
questions and maybe their concerns, and so that we can, because I think council will be engaged on the comp plan and many of the neighborhood concerns and things. If we can get their concerns or what they might want to hear or have questions, would be great.
That's a good point. And we know a lot of constituents go straight to their council office way before they come to us. So having the staff understanding some of the same things we'd be explaining in any of these 101s would be helpful, so they can help give the same kind of coaching of, here's how you get the best information, here's where you can go for this or that. That would be good to all be on the same page. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
That
thanks.
good? Thank you. Next, we have a briefing, Willamette River Goal 15 inventories. Debbie Bischoff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Debbie Bischoff, River Planner, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I just quickly would like to introduce the team here. To my left is Mindy Brooks, an environmental technician and planner who's the natural resource arm, so to speak, to this inventory work, and our manager is behind, Sally Edmonds is the manager over the River Environmental Planning team. So today's briefing is on this Willamette River Greenway inventory. We want to let you know why we're doing this inventory, what our process has been thus far. Want to just mention what's in the inventory real quick, and a few fun facts, as I call it. And then we'll just conclude and open it up for any questions or comments you might have. The Willamette Greenway inventory was last completed in 1986 as part of the adoption of the Willamette Greenway Plan in 1987. And that plan set the Willamette Greenway overlay boundary and also policies and implementing regulations. This inventory that you have before you is specifically responding to statewide planning goal 15, Willamette River Greenway, in terms of the elements that are contained in this inventory. And we recognize that this is not all the information that we use for our planning work, our river planning work, but this is, and I'll explain in a moment why we are kind of sticking to this goal 15 list of features. What the inventory has is a great deal of maps with some summary descriptions and information. And currently, the river planning team is working on the River Plan Central Reach as part of, as Kat well knows, the Central City 2035 plan. And we expect the Central Reach plan to come forward with the full, all the elements of the Central City 2035 plan in 2016 for adoption. And that includes the revised implementing regulations and guidelines, for example. But I did just want to reiterate, I think it was just mentioned in your schedule, that the West Quadrant Plan, there'll be a briefing on it on August 12th with a public hearing on September 9th. And that will be the policy plan for the West Quadrant section of the Central City Plan. So in our future planning, after we finish the River Plan Central Reach, we'll focus on River Plan South Reach and also revisit River Plan North Reach. So as we do our planning work, that is the time that we'll really review and consider changes to Greenway features, guidelines, and regulations, such as the setback requirement for the Greenway. Again, this is really an inventory. It's an existing conditions snapshot of conditions along the Willamette River in our city. And one of the other main reasons I want to underscore that we're doing this inventory, some of you might well recall River Plan North Reach appeals, and that LUBA ruled that the legislative record did not contain sufficient information for them to determine if the city satisfied the Goal 15 inventory requirement. So going forward, we want to be crystal clear with this Goal 15 inventory that was labeled as such and contained the information specifically required or specifically set forth in the statewide planning Goal 15. So that's why we followed this very path with this inventory. So in terms of this process, we have been letting people know of it through our River Plan News, which is an electronic newsletter, and also our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability website. We sent over 5,000 notices out to property owners within the inventory area and to others regarding 2 public open houses we held and the upcoming hearing before this commission on June 24th. We talked with about 30, I call them curious folks at open houses, and they were mostly property owners. And we also received a few phone calls from inquisitive people. And I'm using these adjectives because there hasn't been any controversy with this inventory. I think people are just wanting to find out what it's about and learn more about the information and how perhaps their property is depicted in the inventory. So that's what we've pretty much heard so far. We have notified and discussed the inventory update with interested agencies, and we have met twice with Department of Land Conservation and Development staff. And they will be providing a letter at the hearing that you'll see shortly. In terms of the overview and a few highlights, what this inventory provides is basic map information for, again, this area along the river that we consider through this overlay zone boundary, so what we call our Willamette Greenway boundary. You'll see in this report base and overlay zone information, land use information, ownership information, natural resources characteristics, and recreational and historic and cultural resources. Most of the data sources come from our great Bureau of Planning and Sustainability GIS data, along with county and a few other data sources. So some interesting facts that are in this inventory. The River Greenway is a roughly 17-mile linear corridor in our city, and within the boundary area, there's about 6,730 acres. And on page, figure 1 on page 3 just illustrates the Greenway divided into 3 sections, and that's how we've been modeling our planning: the North Reach, Central Reach, and South Reach. Each of these reaches, as you probably well know, have very different characteristics, land uses, and zoning. The North Reach, our working harbor, has about 2,000 of 2,270 acres in industrial and employment zoning. And on page 4 and 5, we have some data that describes zoning and land use characteristics. The Central Reach, to no surprise, is our mixed-use urban, most mixed-use and urbanly developed area of about 150 acres out of the 230 acres in this reach is in commercial, residential, and mixed-use zoning. And our South Reach, again, if you just travel along on the river, it's no surprise that most of the South Reach is an open space and natural area, which is about 400 out of a total of 655 acres in open space, with the remainder in residential and commercial zones. Overall, for the Willamette River Greenway overlay boundary area, 62% of the zoning is in industrial employment, 20% in open space, and those are the predominant zones. And the generalized land uses of what's actually going on is a little less than that. And those figures are on page 6. So on page 7, we decided to highlight private and public property owners by reach and the ones that have the most land ownership. And I want to send a thanks to Mike Hauk, who just made us aware that we need to revisit that list, and there may be some transposed errors. And so we will be providing some edits or amendments to that at the hearing. But what I would share with you is that in the North Reach, Evraz, Shipyard, Commercial, and Schnitzer Steel are the largest property owners, with the Port of Portland being the largest public property owner in the North Reach. In the Central Reach, it's Oregon Health Sciences University and ZRZ Realty, which is the Zidell family property, with the City of Portland being the largest public property owner. In the South Reach, again, we need to correct, Ross Island Sand and Gravel is the largest private property owner in the South Reach with 135 acres, along with Oaks Park Association, and the City of Portland is the largest public property owner in the South Reach. The proposed inventory includes detailed information about natural resources, and this comes from the natural resources inventory that the Commission previously reviewed and acted on, known as the NRI, as part of the factual basis for the comprehensive plan update. The NRI was adopted by City Council in 2012, and so we're providing some of the featured information on maps 6 and 7 on pages 24 to 27, but there's a great deal of information, including the methodology for the Natural Resources Inventory that's in that document itself. So we have a bunch of documents that are appendices to this inventory. In terms of natural resources, the Willamette River is clearly the largest natural resource feature in the Greenway. On land, there isn't much natural resources due to the urban development nature of our city. The South Reach is the exception, which has more natural features like Oaks Bottom Refuge. In terms of recreation and this inventory, we've identified numerous public parks, open spaces, resource areas. We've identified public docks, the Greenway Trail alignment, and developed Greenway Trail segments, and you can find that on map 8 on pages 28 and 29. And as in the statewide planning goal 15, they asked that we also address recreational needs within the Willamette Greenway, and we've discussed that in the inventory on page 11. We worked with Parks and Rec staff to address this element, and what I would say is that we've used the Parks Vision 2020 plan, which was approved in 2001 by City Council, as the citywide guide to recreational needs, along with individual park and natural resource master plans, which are listed in the document, to help define the recreational needs along the Greenway. On page 12 and map 9 on page 30 to 31 is the historic and cultural resources, and we're showing historic landmarks. We're showing properties that were identified in this historic resources inventory, along with historic districts, boundaries that are partially within this Greenway overlay boundary. So just as this is a very quick briefing, but to conclude, there's a lot of, we feel, interesting data and information in this inventory. And again, it's providing a current snapshot of existing conditions per statewide planning goal 15, and that we will include, and as we do our river planning and Central Reach and other locations, we are using other information, and we are including public input into that planning process, of course, to help define issues and recommendations. We will be presenting to you at a public hearing at your next meeting, and with the hopes that you will recommend to City Council to adopt this inventory as updated supporting information to the Willamette Greenway Plan, which again was adopted as part of our city's comprehensive plan. And I just want to also just state the obvious that this inventory does not change any policies or regulations. It's clearly an existing conditions inventory. And you will start to get your next kind of peek at some Willamette River Greenway related policies and strategies when the Central City 2035 West Quadrant Plan comes to you in August and September. But we're going to follow up, and we're working now with agencies and the public and property owners to develop that complete package for the Central Reach plan as included within the Central City 2035 plan of actions, regulations, update to design guidelines, and that full package again will come to you in 2016. So I just wanted to point over here to these maps on the wall, and there's some larger scale depictions of what you have in the inventory report. We welcome you if you wanted to get up and look at these maps. Feel free to do so, and we're happy to entertain any questions and comments you have. Thank you.
Questions, Mike?
Kind of where we're going. Mike likes it, you're good.
Well, no, I did send staff some questions and probably more observations than anything that relate to how this inventory might be used to in fact change some policies related to tree cutting, vegetation removal, the setback, which is at the present time is 25 feet, which is totally inappropriate in my opinion for protection and restoration opportunities. those are my main questions were how this would be applied later. I was interested, I guess maybe it was 86 when we did the natural resource, the Goal 15 inventory I did with Linda Dobson and Bob Goldie, which was, well, actually I got 2 pints of beer and 6 oyster shooters, I think, out of the deal. So I was curious whether
There's inflation, maybe we get more than that.
I was curious whether you utilized that or did any comparisons from then to now, just out of curiosity, because I know we literally, did you do all the work from GIS based, or were you out there on the ground, or combination, or?
Sure. For what you have in front of you, it's primarily GIS work.
Right.
One of the pieces of information that we will be bringing forward with, like the Central City Plan, North Reach work, is a much more detailed inventory. And you probably remember the North Reach inventory that we brought forward as part of that. And we used everything that was still relevant from the original inventories that you worked on and brought that in. And there were a lot of primarily descriptions that were still really relevant, lists of species that were really relevant. All of that was brought forward. So that'll come back during the planning effort for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious because we literally walked every inch and took overlapping photos of both sides of the river.
Yeah, that information, there was a lot of background information, especially in the North Reach, which was really a great starting point. And we do, as part of those, we do lots of site visit work too. But for this, it's primarily a GIS exercise. Yeah.
So a question just on the recommendation. This goes as a recommendation to be included in the comp plan then, or is it like a base map for the comp plan to reference to?
So my understanding is it is, again, replacing the 85, 86, adopted in 87 original inventory for the Willamette Greenway as supporting information as part of the adopted Willamette Greenway plan, which is part of our comprehensive
Comp plan, okay. So this is just the replacement for the one that was today, that was questioned in the North Reach.
Correct.
So does that solve that problem?
Nothing's ever solved forever, but it does answer the question that was brought up in terms of, is this a reliable map that's up to date? And it answers what went to LUBA at the time, so it resolves that.
Mike?
So yeah, I should have started by saying it. I'm very impressed with the work, and I can't imagine DLCD wouldn't be as well. I do have a question that I brought up about the rankings, low, medium, and high, and I'm assuming that is also, your response will be, well, we will deal with where restoration opportunities exist in even low-ranked habitats which have potential based on the concept of the string of pearls or whatever that was developed in the North Reach process. So that's going to happen during the Central City conversation and the other applications of this inventory.
Right,
Is that correct?
right. So
Those decisions haven't been made through this inventory.
no, this just includes an output of that natural resource inventory that we adopted as factual basis for the comp plan. And so the methodology, that high, medium, low ranking, is based on that methodology. And through our planning efforts, we will do our normal discussions and trying to figure out where is the right place for restoration and right place for protection, and all of that conversation will happen through there.
And the one reference that I mentioned that I didn't see referred to in here, there was a huge amount of work done, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that looked at the entire river with regard to restoration potential. Do you know what I'm referring to?
The whole river?
There's a handbook.
Oh, yeah, the bank design handbook?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yes.
So that would be obviously utilized as another resource.
Yeah, and we are, through the Central City, that's one of the main things that we want to look at updating is that bank design notebook. So, yeah, that's definitely a good resource.
Great, thanks.
Just one comment, I just really want to thank staff on this one. This is the kind of example of stuff that we're doing in-house that most cities our size they just, both the technical knowledge and the writing and, you know, and the layout and everything else. And we just do it all in-house, and so I just am really proud of our team.
Beautiful job. I was just
Good
gonna
job.
say, beautiful, beautiful.
And I meant to do a shout out in the beginning to our GIS and our graphics staff because they were tremendous support for us in this project.
Good work.
Yeah, and I agree. I've been involved in natural resource issues for going on 40-some years now, and it's incredible how BES and BPS and parks have enhanced their ability to do this kind of work that's really kind of unprecedented in other jurisdictions.
Catherine?
Few probably easy questions and mostly around the maps. But so there's times when the lines of the boundaries are jogging into the middle of the river. Is that due to county lines? Like at South Reach, you see it jog at
Do you cite a page?
and then it happens on the
Is it-
north as well. I'm assuming it's following just county.
Yeah, it's, at the South Reach, it goes our city boundary, and then it goes into the pocket, the Dunthorpe area that we have planning jurisdiction, so that becomes our urban service boundary. So it kind of follows wherever our planning authority
Okay,
lies.
got it.
Yeah.
And then page 23, the ownership map. Was just kind of curious, are the various colors, do they mean anything? Or are they just helping you graphically see the difference?
They're graphically helping you see the difference.
That makes sense, because I found that.
It's a very
it's like-
nice arrangement of colors.
It's cool. 29 on the corridor diagram. Just something to look into. I certainly don't have the answer, but question is not Gaines in South Waterfront a greenway view corridor? Maybe it's just a view corridor, not a greenway view corridor, but you might want to look at that.
So the view corridors were based on the 1987 Willamette Greenway Plan designated view corridors. And so if there was subsequent work, my guess is that the subsequent planning work in South Waterfront may have updated some views.
Yeah.
And then do you want to follow up with
Yeah.
some more information?
It's
We're-
just like grabbing the
I know,
mic.
right, no, right. Right now, we are starting up a scenic resource inventory for the Central City, as part of the Central City. And so we have all this and a lot of other information that has been developed over the years about views, view corridors, and we're gonna bring that all together into one nice place and update all of that, and then go through a Goal 5 type of process with it to evaluate how and when we should protect those. So that's an upcoming process. So Debbie wrote down Gaines for us, and we'll go back and check and make sure that's in one of the lists that we're starting with. And if not bringing it forward, we will bring forward proposed new views.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, obviously, if they align with other places in the code, fabulous, right? But then when they align maybe a street off, you kind of maybe wonder if you've got a lot of view corridors stacked up that
Right.
are a little confusing to.
Right, and we anticipate we're gonna have a number of views of the same thing, and maybe
Right.
we need to choose which one of those is the best view of that thing, and we have a new bridge to have views
Absolutely.
of, so.
Cool. And then last but not least, the historic and cultural resources. And really more questioning, so I just don't know much about that process besides landmarks, which is pretty straightforward, or at least in my mind. But how were the other ones arrived at? What makes something a historic resource? And this is for the built historic Appendix E versus a landmark.
Could you just say the end of your question again?
I guess I'm just
sorry.
trying to understand. I understand what makes something a historic landmark.
Mhm.
How do you determine what's a historic resource that's what's
Okay.
not a landmark?
Okay, so back in the 80s, I believe the state, and I'm not sure how maybe someone else here might know, but the state worked with the city to inventory historic resources, what they thought were historic resources within our city, and that's what is listed here, and that inventory hasn't been officially updated in 20, 30 years. And there's actually, when I've spoken with our historic resources planner, a property owner can request being taken off the list too, but that is how it was determined.
It's using that list. I was just wondering if
Yeah.
there's, and you got at it, any kind of update process that happened, but that answers it. Thank you.
And individual property owners can request of the state to be put on the list also.
Okay, thank you. That's
Right.
it?
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't remember this question. My recollection is, with regard to natural resource protection, restoration, whatever, Goal 15 applies on the Willamette River, and the city has not applied Goal 5 on the Willamette. Is that correct?
They
And
both.
I've never understood that.
Right, the inventory processes both apply within the same area.
Right.
But the local jurisdiction can make a choice when it comes to what we have to comply with from a regulatory standpoint. So like for the North Reach, we chose within the Willamette Greenway to use the Willamette Greenway as our guiding goal. And outside of the Greenway boundary, we used Goal 5, so we did the ESEE analysis
Right.
outside of the Greenway boundary. It's a choice we have, so we can make different choices if we want to as we do the Central or South Reach and as we revisit the North Reach, and that can be part of our conversation.
Yeah, the reason I raised the issue is that, at least in my experience, from my perspective, Goal 5, I think, provides a more robust opportunity to really protect resources than Goal 15.
Goal 15 was really intended for setting the Greenway boundary and for determining acquisition.
Right.
Whereas Goal 5, as you know, is natural resources, scenic resources, cultural resources. So
Right.
it really is a different purpose. And so we can look at what's the best use of those goals as we do our planning work.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important policy decision that needs to be made in this process.
But we do have to comply with Goal 15. If we can comply with Goal
Yeah.
5 also, that's one path, but we have to comply with 15.
Sure, yeah. I'm thinking of them as being complementary, not mutually exclusive.
Other questions? Good work. Look forward
Good work.
to having it come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes today's meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Howard.
I apologize to you all, really, this is